Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to our TGIF and Product Owner episode this week with Kevin Hoey. Hey Kevin, welcome back.
Hi Vasco.
So Friday is Product Owner here on the podcast. It is such a critical role for us and for our teams and for our organizations as well. So we'll talk about what great Product Owners do in a minute. Sure. But first, let's start with the opposite. What might have been potentially, Kevin, the worst Product Owner anti-pattern you've witnessed in your career?
Yeah, sure. I guess with this, I'd like to start by saying I've never worked with a PO who doesn't give 100% effort, who doesn't come to work to do a good job, who doesn't, not care about people. And it's a really difficult job and they've got a lot to juggle. So first off, I'd like to say that. Have I witnessed some anti-patterns? Yeah, loads. It's probably a really common one, but the worst one is the absent product owner when they're just not there. And I had a team and we had this exact problem that the PO was busy. It's not their fault. They've got 1,000,001 things to do, and they would struggle to find time, and they would try and get us to change our meetings, when our sprint events were. It was a nightmare to work with. They weren't there to answer any questions or provide any context. And then they were trying to shift stuff around for the developers who 1 minute they wanted to do a stand up at 9:30. A few weeks later, they wanted it to be at 10:30. On individual days, they wanted to move it. It was really difficult. And that was a difficult anti-pattern to face, I think, and lots of teams face it. I ended up having to sit down with the PO, the worst one I had for being absent, and just have a talk with them, treat them as an individual. I think every PO is different. They've all got different skills. They're all some love the technical detail. Some are wonderful with internal stakeholders. Some know what the customer wants. And so it's sitting down with them, trying to understand what their pressures were, why they weren't in the events. And then I kind of explained what the cost was to the team that no one had done before. So I'm like, if you're not in, I firmly believe the PO should be in daily stand-up, daily scrum. It's not for them, it's for the developers. But if you've got a developer who's got a question and the PO is not there, they're stuck, they're blocked, they're waiting. I've had it before where a developer said, oh, if this wasn't a tick box, if this was a radio button, I think I could do this twice as fast. What do you think? The PO's not there. They then have to wait for the PO. And then what are they going to then do? Stop their work halfway, pick something else up and work on that? So I kind of explained that to the PO, that you're being absent is causing problems for the team. And then sometimes they weren't even there in
okay, but that conversation is not easy, I'm sure, because it's very easy for someone who hears that to feel that they are being blamed. So how did you tackle that?
It's going in with that no blame, understanding them first and foremost, understanding why they can't be there, going in with the belief that they're trying to do the best thing that they can, and really trying to understand what their problems were. So it comes out, I've explained the impact of the team, then they've explained why they can't be there, and they've got all of these other things to do, and it's like, okay, well, how can we help you? So I think at the time I thought it was a great solution. We kind of came up with the proxy product owner kind of thing, one person to do this for you. And ultimately they actually became the product owner, and that worked quite well. So we got some internal, ended up getting promoted to the product owners. That did work well, but for a while they didn't know the context. And I remember them coming to one meeting, getting one event and getting ripped to shred by the developers when they came with a user story. I'd like to do this. And the developers are like, why? And they couldn't answer why. They didn't know the why. They knew the what, but they didn't know the why. And so the developers like, well, we're not going to work on it if you can't tell us why you want it. But
tough love.
Yeah, tough love. But they learned fast. They never came back ever again without knowing the why. So that was really good. So
yeah, and actually this is a very good point, because very often the Proxy PO is an anti-pattern, and I've seen it more often than not being an anti-pattern. But in this story, we heard how it can be a stepwise transition to a much better situation for the PO who is not present, right?
Yeah.
And for the team. And
Yeah.
now it might be a difficult transition, as you just said, right? Like this Proxy PO was kind of ripped to shreds by the developers when they didn't know the answer. But if they are able, if they are resilient and they get the support of the Scrum Master, of course, they are able to step into the position and eventually, as in this story, kind of take on the role of the PO.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's what comes with experience, is that you don't have to follow the Scrum guide exactly, and you might know something, it's an anti-pattern, but it might be better than another anti-pattern. And if you know what the risks are, you can help mitigate those for a while. Go in with your eyes wide open. No, okay, this isn't the best thing to do. This is why it could go wrong. Okay, what can we do in the short term to stop that or whatever? So yeah, sometimes you just got to play the cards that you dealt, I think, sometimes, and be a little bit realistic.
And one thing that would not be acceptable in the end is leave the team without the support of someone whose job would be to go out and figure out the answers, right? Because otherwise the team would have to do it, and they couldn't do the other tasks that they had to.
Yeah, definitely. And then you get then there's just that confusion of like the what, the why, the how, what are we doing? And you can either end up just building stuff and gold plating things and removing the customer from everything that you do, and you've just sat there like a feature factory just building things for no reason. You can end up in that situation as well. So it can end up quite confusing.
It's a great story. Now, not all product owners are absent or have any other anti-patterns. Some are really excellent at what they do, and that's what we will explore next, Kevin. So share with us, what was potentially the best product owner you've ever worked with? How did they work?
Yeah, 100%. So I think I've been fortunate. I've worked with lots of really good product owners, and the one thing they are really good at is providing context to the team. Really good at telling the team why the team exists. Why is the company spending like hundreds of thousands of pounds on you as a team? And they were able to clearly explain, this is how it impacts the customers. This is how it's going to make money for the company. This is our vision. This is what we're going to do. This is roughly what order I think that we should do it in. And they kind of provide that context, which is fantastic. And they do it quite frequently as well. I think over communicating is better than under communicating. Now we have patterns where at the start of every sprint planning, we go through our product board where we've got our roadmap about what we want to deliver, and we can see that context, and it just brings it to life much better than the Jira backlog. So I think that's really important, providing context for the team as well, and also providing feedback, that context from the customers as well, when things have gone well, telling them they've gone well, telling them what the client liked or what they didn't like as well, and sharing that praise as well. So it's just providing that overall context for the team and giving them then direction. And along with that as well, I think the best ones, the language that they use is really important, I think, as well. So sometimes there's a problem, I think, sometimes with the product owner role, where it's sold that you're the mini CEO. So it's probably another anti-pattern, but the language like, you will do this, you're my team. And you get these kind of generals who think they're more important than everybody else. And that's an anti-pattern. The opposite of that, which I've fortunately see more often, is they use language like us and we, and they really listen to the team, and they let the developers are often coming up with ideas that can help improve the product. It's not their domain to do that, but they know it better than anyone. They're building it. They're like, oh, what about if we did this? What about they did that? And the PO goes away and thinks about that. And sometimes the developers' ideas end up being potentially new features or tweaks to existing features as well. So I think that's really important, that they're a team player. They might feel it's their team, and sometimes I think what's difficult for them as well is that they have to switch languages. And I had this when I used to be a project manager, and I had a boss who used to say to me, when I walk in the room, someone should know who the project manager is. You should be in charge of everything, running everything. You should know everything. And for me, there was a mindset shift to being a Scrum Master, and not people should walk into the room and not know who the Scrum Master is. The team should be driving most things. And I think for product managers, they have to go to meetings with directors and C-suite level people, and they probably have to use language about, I'm doing this, as well sometimes, to help share not just what the team are doing, but probably to get some value for themselves as well. So I think sometimes they have to switch languages depending on who their audience is as well. So I think that's a challenge for them sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the aspect of the language because it really helps us detect what is the perspective that the product owner brings to the work with the team, right? Like if they say, oh, you do this and then you do that, they bring this dictatorial kind of language, then we know that they are probably not going to be very good at stepping back, hearing the team and working with the team to solve problems, but rather maybe they want to solve all of the problems themselves, right? And I think that's a great tip for us as Scrum Masters to pay attention to the language.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, that within other roles within the team as well, you can, again, it's that language. Sometimes you might have to have separate people doing QA. You might have devs who do it as well. But it's that, is there an us and them language, or is there a we language? I think that can be across the whole team, I think.
Absolutely. Language is very important. Now, we're getting close to the end, Kevin. It's been a great week with you. Lots of insights and great stories that you've shared. But if people want to know more about you and the work that you're doing, where could they go?
LinkedIn, I guess. I think there's only one Kevin Hoey on LinkedIn, so you can find me. And if you put a link in the show notes, people can find me that way.
Absolutely.
I do like talking about Scrum and Agile. But within my teams, I do like listening, so I'm not just a talker.
and I mean, this is a good point. I think talking is also listening, right? It's not just, putting information onto others, but it's also understanding what others have in their mind, where they're coming from. So I like the word conversation. So these days I talk more about having a conversation, but talking is also having a conversation. So
yeah, definitely.
Great point. Kevin, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you, Vasco.
One more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast is over, but there's a lot more we have to share. We have developed our own membership site where you find a community of active and engaged Scrum Masters. In this site, you get access to exclusive content and get to interact with us, your podcast host, as well as the best Scrum Masters in the world. So join us at scrummasterpodcast.com and keep this podcast free of advertising. See you next week for one more full week of Scrum Master tips and tricks. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.